The Tom Woods Show, episode 1631.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Folks, if you're considering homeschooling, you know I recommend the self-taught Ron Paul curriculum, for which I created 400 videos. It's an excellent education in all the standard subjects, plus personal finance for teens, how to be an effective public speaker, how to run a home business, the kinds of things nobody teaches, but they darn well should. Not to mention, it's self-taught, so you get your sanity back as a parent. Make sure you join at my special link, because only there do you get my $160 worth of free bonuses you can't get anywhere else. Check it out at ronpaulhomeschool.com. Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. I got Jeff Deist on the show, which makes it an awesome day. Before we get to Jeff, I want to tell you about yet another act of heroism by a Tom Woods Show listener. There are all different ways people consume content. Some people don't like listening to podcasts. They like reading. Other people like to listen to audiobooks, and other people, whatever it is, all different ways of transmitting content. People like to watch videos. So what we have over at UncleNap.com is not a series of new articles on libertarianism, but rather a selection of the best libertarian articles of the day, but read to you so you can listen to them. And a lot of people prefer to consume their content that way. And I can attest, having gone to UncleNap.com, that the selections are very well chosen. So there you go. And the creator of the site said, look, it would take me forever to write articles like these myself, but I don't have to. They've already been written by some of the best people we have. I'm just going to read them and convert them into audio format for people who prefer that. So check that out, UncleNap.com. I'll link to it at tomwoods.com/1631. And of course, you know where this is going. The gentleman who created the site got his hosting through my link, so he gets a nice, fresh batch of traffic because I'm promoting him here on the show. Not to mention the other excellent benefits you get when you use my link that will help you get started more quickly and help you when you get stuck. So check out all those benefits and how you can get them at tomwoods.com/publicity. All right, Jeff Deist is the president of the Mises Institute, which you should visit at Mises.org. And he has a piece on what the governors should do at this moment, given the situation with the virus. So we're going to talk about that, but begin just with a more general discussion of what's been happening. Jeff, welcome back.
Hello, Tom. It's been a while.
Listen, I know you and I are both thinking the same thing. I've already talked about this blankety-blank virus. I have nothing else to say. But you know what? Let me tell you something, Jeff. And I speak for the entire listening audience. Whenever you try and tell us I have nothing more to say, you are so full of it. You are so out to lunch on this stuff. You have no idea how much people enjoy hearing what you have to say. I had somebody in my group yesterday, and you're in my group, you jerk, you probably saw it, saying, am I the only one who wishes there was a book by Jeff Deist that I could sink my teeth into? So I don't care you have nothing to say. First of all, you will. I guarantee I'm going to get new stuff out of you. But secondly, even if you're just repeating the other stuff, not all of us have heard that. And in particular, you have a piece you wrote over at Mises that I want to sink our teeth into in a few minutes. But I just want you to feel like you have been appropriately scolded. Can we proceed now?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Okay, all right, good. Now, can I tell people what we just said before we started recording?
What did we just say? Yes.
Yeah, about traveling? Yeah, okay. Because I love traveling, like more than ever. I spent 2019 traveling all the time, all over the place, having a great old time. So this is like a special hell for me. And every time somebody says, oh, but I'm doing more gardening and I'm spending more time with my whatever the heck it is, I'm getting some projects done around the house, I want to wring their necks, And it's not that those are bad things. It's good to sometimes to sit back and reflect about what matters in life. I totally hear that. But this is killing me. This is killing me in my own private hell here, that I am stuck like a prisoner in my own home. And so you and I were saying that we will never complain again. Like you were saying, I would fly basically like to the middle of nowhere, eat at the worst Chinese restaurant in America, and I'd love it. And that is exactly where I am right now.
Well, sure. And people forget that travel is a luxury. Go talk to your great-grandparents. in their generation. A lot of them never left the county in which they were born or maybe drove a couple hours to the big city in their state. I mean, we forget how much travel is really a privilege.
Yeah, and boy, was I taking it for granted because, geez,
Yeah,
I mean, it was like a different world just a month ago. I was early March, I was seeing Broadway shows. Late February, I was in London. January in the Bahamas. I mean, not a bad life, but I've worked my tail off to get it. And now I have all this unspendable income. I realize that's not the... I sound like the worst... Hold on a minute. Let me stop myself here. I sound like the worst person in the world right now. Wait a minute. But we cannot continue till I acknowledge just how bad that sounded. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I really, really miss something that brings me a lot of happiness. That's all. I realize people have suffered potentially the loss of livelihoods and income sources, and they're separated from family, and there are health problems, and people have died. I don't want to minimize that. I realize I sound very, very silly, but when you sit, around for week after week after week, and they won't tell you when you're being let out, well, sometimes your judgment gets a little clouded.
Well, and I think that's purposeful. I think if they had told people 2 months ago it's going to be 60 days, they would have gotten some pushback. So this sort of open-ended, we'll see, keep changing the date, set a new date. I think it's absolutely egregious. I think it's wildly beyond any sort of rational response to the actual threat that this virus poses, such as it is. And more importantly, I just love the idea of some governor somewhere being entrepreneurial and coming up with a real approach now, today, and reopening, with some reason behind it, with some rationality behind it, because we have an experiment right now. We're able to look at Sweden, we're able to look at Japan, we're able to look at Taiwan and Singapore and compare and contrast them to Italy, for example, or Spain. And that's never been more important. And, I do like the idea that this crisis might get people thinking again along those lines, that top-down doesn't work. Because let's face it, the WHO has failed to assert any authority whatsoever during this crisis. So they're the global body in charge of this. Here in the United States, the CDC, the FDA are being, attacked and mocked, and I think rightfully so. So that's the good news here, is that people, I think, are maybe questioning the wisdom of centralization. And Tom, let's not forget, Trump's waffled on this, but the one thing he hasn't done is created a de facto national shutdown, including the airlines. He hasn't done that. I don't know why. I'm a little surprised, but at the moment, we still have the flexibility at the state-by-state level to try things.
I am going to disagree with you a bit here, and I hope you can prove me wrong. I don't think people are questioning centralization. We have people screaming for more centralization. The people who are questioning it were already questioning it. Trump's natural base, and even they don't want to question it too much because they know he's partly in this pandemic thing and the draconian response, so they can't question it too much. But I don't see that. I wish I did. I see generally shut down. We need to be locked down. And are we sure this works? I mean, could there be drawbacks to these shutdowns that are not as obvious? This crisis is like the revenge of the midwits, because every one of them's walking around carefully explaining to people what it means to flatten the curve. We need to flatten, because they read that in the paper and they memorized it, and they're going to tell you, even though you already know that, but you're asking about other things. Okay, but are there other countervailing factors we need to bear in mind? But you see, we need to flatten the curve. And you get talked to like you're 7, and I'm stuck in my house, and I can't go anywhere, and midwits are all over the place, and nobody will have a conversation, and I just want to smack people. I mean, this is making me nuts.
Well, what's so interesting is it's actually not proven that asymptomatic people who have the virus spread it. Okay, that's an assumption, and that may in fact be true, but we don't know it. And I don't see that pointed out very often. There's this assumption, and you mentioned the Karens of the world, and of course Nextdoor, the app, was just tailor-made for this. The little gossipy talk about where your neighbors are going and that the kids down the street are having a basketball game or something. What a world. But the idea that by you just going out and not staying home, Even if that's just down to your office to be alone there or something like that, you are lengthening the amount of time we're all going to have to be home. You're very selfish. You're going to ultimately kill people, and enough people like you are going to cause more deaths and stuff. And that's actually not proven. Okay, and it's also not proven that social distancing works. In other words, the data is still coming in. We don't know whether or not simply doing nothing at all, herd immunity might actually, we don't know. I'm not saying it does, but it might actually result in fewer deaths overall. It's very hard to say because of the complexities of the data here. People have comorbidity. They have all kinds of other things wrong with them. You have all kinds of variables, smoking, obesity, et cetera. You have all kinds of variables with regard to location. Obviously, in dense urban environments, a virus spreads faster than it does in low-density Montana. So the whole thing, what even counts as a death? I mean, we don't even know, Tom, whether January 1 through April 1 of 2020, the overall mortality in the United States, deaths from any cause, car accident, old age, COVID, heart attack, we don't even know if the overall mortality in the United States in those 4 months is higher or lower, about the same, whatever, versus 2019 or 2018 or whatever, because we don't have that data yet. So just shutting down the country on all of this sort of flimsy what-if stuff, I think is crazy. I'm sure some of your listeners disagree. I get that. I'm sure some of your listeners think that this is a more serious virus than maybe I do. I mean, obviously it's serious if you get it, and it seems nastier. But I don't even like calling it a crisis. We have about 22,000 deaths in the United States attributed to COVID. That doesn't mean that they didn't die with COVID as opposed to of COVID. But nonetheless, let's just accept 22,000 deaths. And let's say by the end of the year, we'll have 50,000 deaths. In my view, that is not a crisis. That's a nasty virus that killed some people, particularly vulnerable people and aged people. That's not a crisis. That's not World War II. That's nothing close to World War II. And our reaction is the crisis.
There's so much to this because the subject of herd immunity brings up a lot of controversy. Some people saying it's not clear that you could get herd immunity with something like this, or if you did, the cost of getting there would be very high. And then I just read a piece in the Boston Globe over the weekend saying, no, herd immunity really is the only way out of this. It genuinely is. No one wants to be honest about that, but that really is the only real way fully out of this. And then you got these crazy, I get the different kinds of restrictions we have. I'm familiar with them. But then in Michigan, you can't go in your own car from one property you own to another property you own because you might spread the virus. How? How's that going to happen? What are you talking about? I loved I think it was the governor of New Jersey said, we need to observe social distancing in our own homes. Are you out of your blankety blank mind? You want me to stand 6 feet away from my kid? What is the matter? I mean, and as I say, it's like the revenge of the midwits. The midwits, for people who are not listening to Michael Malice, these are people who, they're not dumb. They can memorize the answers on a true-false test and get an 80. They're all right. But they think they're really smart because they can repeat what they've been told. And oh my gosh, these people are absolutely everywhere. So to try to get them to think about complicating factors is impossible. Like, for example, I have mentioned a couple of times that Zeke Emanuel, who is Rahm Emanuel's brother, happens to be a physician, has said repeatedly that we are going to have to hunker down for 18 months. And you think you think he means, okay, we'll have some social distancing, but obviously we're not going to be on full lockdown for 18 months. Oh, no. He says, no. We are going to have to give up things that we cherish, like, and I kid you not, these are the examples: seeing your friends, seeing your extended family, income. That was actually one of them. It had a list of things we're going to have to get used to living without. 18 blankety blank months. And so I posted this on Twitter and I said, what kind of sickos do we live under? And I had a handful of people saying, well, yeah, that's the logic of it. Of course we have to be in our houses for 18 months. I think we need secession. I do not want to be on the same planet with these people, but I'll take two different countries if I can get that.
Well, forget 18 months. By the end of May, I think the natives are going to be getting pretty restless.
Even the ones who now are trumpeting how patriotic they are for wanting everything shut down.
Well, first of all, if you really shut things down, shut most people down, other than what you deem really essential. Well, that's an awful lot of people who produce an awful lot of goods and services, and those just aren't going to be available to you. All the stuff you think you can get from Amazon, all the stuff that fills your local CVS and your local grocery store just isn't going to be there. I mean, we're going to have all kinds of shortages if the vast majority of people stay home, because it takes a lot of people to produce and direct and ship and box and bring whatever is at your local Target on a truck. I mean, there's a lot of people involved in that, and the idea that most of us can just stay home and there'll still be Target full of stuff just isn't true. And so Americans like the whiff of a crisis, the romance of it, in our kind of largely mediocre lives. All of a sudden, there's this thing that's like World War II. It's it's gone with the wind. But no, it isn't World War II. And so they as much as they like the idea of some sort of, we're all in this together crisis, they won't much like any sort of actual hardship. I mean, you go a couple more weeks and you don't have Ben and Jerry's and you don't have Netflix or something, and people will be very, very upset. So I don't think it's going to go that long. I think that's a crazy thing to say. And 18 months of no income would I guess the government would send us checks or something. That's clearly just insane. And so the idea that I didn't realize that was Rahm Emanuel's brother, but I mean the idea that people are out there saying that sort of thing is crazy. And there's some governors out there I think are waking up to it.
Well, I hope so. And also, by the way, can you imagine, given that the American religion is the public school, keeping the kids out of that for that long? That's just not possible, even if they do it over the computer. Half the point of sending them to the school is so the parents don't have to watch them during the day. This is not an option. There's no way they're going to let that go on for too long. Once they've made clear to everybody, they're not one of these bad people who has independent thoughts. Like they are ready to comply with whatever's asked of them. I am hopeful that will wear off and they'll say, all right, look, obviously we all know what has to happen here. I mean, we'll make special provision for people who have been shown to be especially vulnerable, and they should obviously be isolating, and we'll do the best we can to speed up treatments to mitigate this in the meantime. So in other words, do for them what they're doing for every single person. Now that doesn't solve every problem, but obviously you cannot close society down, and you can't impose on them what is, as I was saying in my conversation with Alex Epstein, a kind of death. Closing off to a lot of people the things that give their lives meaning is a kind of death.
Well, sure it is. And that's why I was so struck by all the snarky coverage of people attempting to attend Easter services at their church, wherever that church might be. And I read a very, very snarky article in, I think it was the New Republic of all places, that was lambasting Florida Governor DeSantis as a know-nothing, and there's all these Neanderthal evangelicals in Florida who still want to go to church, even though any kind of respectable mainline denomination knows, unlike these snake-handling Baptists, of course, that everyone should just stay home, and even the Pope knows that, and yada, yada. And I was struck by, as I read it, that it would never dawn on the writer of this article in his or her worldview, I don't recall the author's name, that there are some people for whom life without religious observation would not be worth living, right? Because for them, church is just some kind of goofy thing that goofy people, superstitious people go and do. And, even if you're that kind of nice, older Unitarian or Presbyterian couple down the street, they're not really too religious, because I live in Belmont, not Fishtown, if you know the two cities that Charles Murray created in his book, Coming Apart. I think it was in Coming Apart. So they all live in Belmont, and in Belmont, everyone knows that religion is at most just sort of a social thing, but, come on. And it just struck me. I mean, there was just so much hostility in that article. It was talking about, Americans have always had a troubled relationship with science, vaccines and evolution, and Florida especially, because that's where the Scopes monkey trial was. And I mean, it's just the worst pretensions are coming out in this virus. It's not like 9/11, where I think there was at least a showing of unity. I think that most of the country had warm vibes towards New York City after 9/11 and wished it well. And just what we're less than 20 years later now, and the politicization of everything, everybody has to see this virus as either Trump is the most corrupt, ignorant, incompetent buffoon of all time, and this just shows, and this is a catastrophe, or, well, no, it's not so bad, and maybe some of these antibiotics and anti-malarial drugs really would work. So it's just absolutely sickening to see the reaction to this falling along these political lines. I mean, it really is discouraging, I have to say.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about practical suggestions. Folks, there are things we each look back on and think, how did I get that so wrong? Like, remember when you used to think button-fly jeans were a good idea? Yeah, here's a process I want to make as complicated and time-consuming as possible. Well, we're always going to get things wrong. That's just life. But there are also things we can get right on the first try, like shopping for life insurance, and that's where Policy Genius comes in. Policy Genius makes finding the right life insurance a breeze. I've used it myself, and in minutes, you're comparing quotes from top insurers and finding your best price. You could save $1,500 or more a year by using Policy Genius to compare life insurance policies. And Policy Genius doesn't just make life insurance easy. They can also help you find the right home and auto insurance or disability insurance. So even if, particularly under Woods' ridicule and prodding, you've come to decide, yeah, those button-fly jeans were a terrible idea, you'll never be distressed or embarrassed about life insurance with Policy Genius. In just a few minutes, you can find your best price and apply at policygenius.com. We all get things wrong from time to time. At least we can get life insurance right with Policy Genius. All right, Jeff, you wrote a short piece over at Mises.org. I'll link to it at tomwoods.com/1631, What Governors Can Do. And in fact, it was on the blog, so not very long. And you went through and gave some bullet point suggestions. And I liked reading this because, number one, I like reading anything you write. And secondly, we get complaints as libertarians all the time that we're good complainers, but where's your proposal? Where's your idea? So, all right, doggone it, Jeff Deist has given us some. So I'm going to read these and let's talk about them. So the first one, you say, one brave governor or county supervisor or mayor gets the ball rolling by forming an impromptu coalition of states interested in staying open or reopening. Political pressure to go along with other states is strong, and the federal government has a long and sordid history of bullying states into compliance with national edicts using the carrot and the stick. The Trump administration thus far has been surprisingly reluctant to issue a national shutdown, and governors looking for daylight should seize on this. They will need each other to stand against the tide. And then the next point is very similar. Hold a press conference to announce the coalition. Pick a marketable name for the effort, something like South Dakota Open for Business, and hold weekly calls open to media. Discuss conditions, options, and ideas, but make it clear that each state is wholly independent and that decisions are necessarily localized. This is not an interstate compact. All right. Now, first of all, are you hearing anybody proposing anything like that, or is this just coming out of your head?
Well, I think Kristi Noem in South Dakota has been maybe the most out there or bravest to date, but it's awfully hard to stand alone. And she's got a bunch of people in her own state, of course, who are the Karens or the next door app types who think that she ought to just fall in line. So I think a regional coalition, especially in the less densely populated, let's say the Mountain West and the West, where the number of cases has been few and the number of deaths has been few, makes a lot of sense.
All right, so now let's go on here. So announce guidelines, not orders, to citizens along these lines. People over 70 are strongly encouraged to self-quarantine in a strict manner. Those over 50 who have existing medical vulnerabilities to the virus are encouraged to do the same. Healthy people under 50 are welcome to return to daily activities, but are strongly encouraged to wear masks, proven to be effective in several Asian countries. Of course, many residents will self-quarantine regardless, and some businesses will choose to shut down regardless per their individual choices. All right. What I wonder about is, of course, you're right that some people will quarantine anyway, and a lot of people will not immediately emerge to dine in a restaurant, although I certainly will, absolutely 100% will. But what about a business that has 100 employees, and they're afraid that if somebody goes and gets the virus and, heaven forbid, dies, they get some kind of wrongful death suit on their hands. Like, who wants to open under those conditions?
Well, I think that's followed up with in a later bullet point. I think that goes to premises liability or employer liability. But let's just recall, though, for a second, that it's not so easy to prove how and where and when, you got the virus. You could say, well, I went back to work because my employer reopened. Okay, well, you're not required to go back to work. I'm not arguing for that. And then you say, and then I worked for a couple of days and I came down with the virus and that means I got it at work. Well, if that's provable, then perhaps you have a lawsuit against your employer, but it's not always provable.
Okay. All right. In fact, I'm sorry. I did say that's actually where I thought of it was your later bullet point. Reopen government courts and set a deadline of 60 or 90 days hence for resumption of contract enforcement, including evictions. Ask the State Bar Association to set up statewide centers for landlords and tenants to meet and negotiate using realistic numbers, rental agreements. Renegotiate, in case I didn't say that. Hardline landlords can go to court and hardline tenants can refuse payment, but evictions benefit neither party in the immediate term. Okay, so there's that. And then in stages, reopen public schools and universities based on local conditions, hold parental votes online to determine whether each school district will continue online classes or revert to physical attendance. I thought that was a strange decision to close particularly the universities. Because here you got all these young, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. Nobody knows if they're carrying it or not. And then you send them home. Well, while they're in the college, where are they hanging out? With each other. You send them home, they're going to be with their grandparents and their parents who are much more vulnerable to this thing. I don't get, why would you not want to keep them there? Wouldn't that keep their families safer?
Yeah, well, I think shutting down public schools generally is part of the linchpin of this whole thing, because if kids are at home, then parents have to be. In other words, public school has just become glorified babysitting. So unless and until we reopen public schools, there's going to be a serious drag on people going back to work because they can't, right? They have to, if they have younger kids.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So that really is a major part of this. Now, on the other hand, we are getting to the end of the school year very soon. So that does mitigate against that a bit, because then the summer vacation comes up and presumably they've made arrangements for their kids in previous summers and those would kick in. On the other hand, maybe that summer camp you might have been planning to send your kid to isn't taking place anymore, so there could still be complications. Then you're talking about restaurants, bars, and retail outlets. Announce that those are open as usual, with the strong caveat that provable cases of virus transmittal will be heard in state courts under a broad doctrine of premises liability. This will encourage the kind of measures by owners that have been seen in Taiwan and Singapore, ranging from using digital thermometers at store entrances to relentless scrubbing of surfaces in restaurants. Now, of course, you were talking about whether people who are asymptomatic can transmit the virus. We don't know that for sure, but if that turned out to be the case, then the digital thermometer doesn't do you any good.
Yes, but it
does you some good.
Yeah, I mean, it's one way to weed out people from the get-go. And I'm sure restaurants don't want to do this, don't get me wrong. It's just that I think in places like Taiwan, this kind of, social conformity or intrusiveness or is a little more culturally acceptable. It would be an awfully weird thing if you were, rolling out to your local Chick-fil-A or something, and there's some, 20-year-old kid at the store entrance lording it over you with a. But these thermometers, you just point them at the forehead. You don't insert them anywhere. And, look, it's an idea. Would a restaurateur consider it as opposed to zippy skippy zero as their, which is the level of business they've got at the moment? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But what I worry about for them is that, as you surely know, restaurants operate on razor thin profit margins, even at capacity. If they have to reopen at half capacity, maybe they don't reopen. Or maybe it's the case that at least for a little while they could take advantage of what I think really would be genuine pent-up demand, where people will gladly go to a restaurant at Wednesday at 3 whereas normally the restaurant's dead Wednesday at 3. They'll just go when they can go, and maybe they can spread out the flow of people successfully because we're all suffering from so much cabin fever. We'll take it. Yeah, I'll make a reservation for Wednesday at 3 p.m. for dinner, sure.
Yeah, but the point is that, after 9/11, the economy tanked and, business travel tanked, airlines tanked, restaurants tanked to an extent, but at least you could go out there and try to do entrepreneurial things. You could have a skeleton staff and only offer a few of the items on the menu. You could, have 2-for-1 coupons in the newspaper, have a loss leader just to get people thinking about you again. You could, there's all kinds of things you could do entrepreneurial to just operate and try. Right now, we're denying that opportunity.
All right, let's go to your next one. So here is what we were talking about before. Let me read this whole thing. Immediately bid out a statewide insurance claims facility for coronavirus deaths so that in worst-case scenarios, families will be compensated for loss of loved ones. Insist that payments are retroactive to cover deaths prior to the bid and use the model of airlines after crashes. Quick payouts, little paperwork, claims personnel with good bedside manner. Payouts of $1 million would not be impossible to insure against in low-population states, where deaths likely will remain well under 5,000. Insurers themselves can go to the reinsurance markets, and insurance companies would have every incentive to test, treat, and take measures necessary to keep citizens alive. They would become de facto partners when it comes to securing medical equipment, hospital beds, and personnel. Insurance companies would also have a strong incentive, unlike politicians, to determine what constitutes death from the virus as opposed to death with the virus simply present in the body. Use bond revenue, discussed below, to cover premiums. Okay, let me do this. In fact, let me read the whole rest of the thing and then we'll just comment. Immediately, okay, so your next point is about bidding for supplies of these various drugs like hydroxychloroquine, and eliminating state restrictions on prescription of these drugs, and even consider making them available over the counter, distribute them widely across the state, issue state bonds for sale to private equity investors, hedge funds, foundations, and individuals, secure them with real estate owned by the state, make government rather than taxpayers sacrifice for once, price them aggressively with higher than market rates of interest, but not junk bond rates, make these bonds non-taxable by the issuing state itself, both with respect to income and capital gains, and you can use these funds to provide insurance, medical equipment, hospital capacity, etc., as needed, and then encourage regional airlines or just major airlines serving the state to relocate aircraft there and resume domestic flights. And then you go on and continue for a few more paragraphs, but that's the basic gist of the basic points. So that's about the most thorough thing I've heard, first of all, with just talking about what would it look like to resume, what kind of practices would we probably spontaneously adopt, what about promising drugs, what should the government do with regard to those, and the state bond thing, that I hadn't thought of. Of this, what do you think are the most? Are there ones that are really indispensable or original, or that maybe they haven't considered? Or what are your own comments on your own comments, basically?
Well, I think, obviously the worst case scenario for anyone is to lose a loved one because of the virus. Now, that could happen anywhere with or without closures, as we discussed earlier. We don't know. But a lot of people don't have life insurance or much. And, garden variety term life insurance does pay out in the event of a coronavirus death. Even though it's a pandemic, it's not excluded from the policy in any way. Now, accidental death coverage obviously doesn't cover this sort of thing. But if you have a sort of a generic term life policy, you're probably covered if in fact you die. But a lot of people don't have life insurance, or they don't have much. So if a governor wanted to get creative and open the state, I think he or she would want to have a facility, which wouldn't be that hard to do. I shouldn't think, if the state was the purchaser and the bidder was, the whole marketplace, to say, look, we are going to make it so that God forbid anyone in our state passes away as a result of this. We're going to make sure that their family's well compensated. I think you could do that without a huge amount of premiums, but, have a single payer at the state level. We don't like state action, but we're talking about at least a more localized solution. And, let that payer be the state, and then find a way to pay the premiums using some sort of open for business bonds, which I think would attract some investment right now, because there are plenty of funds out there, believe it or not, that are sitting on cash. And, I think it's just a way to get creative and say, look, there's some risk in the world, and opening our state up for business has some risk. But if the worst scenario happens, you or your loved ones will be taken care of.
All right, now we get to, I think, more or less the end of our conversation, because I want to just keep this a regular Tom Woods Show length thing, because as I say, I feel like I've said what I can say about this, and you're tired of talking about it, and yet, even though I've said I have to go on and cover other topics, I feel weird doing it, because this is the thing that's on everybody's mind. So as we record this, so this'll air tomorrow, but as we record it, it's April, well, let me check what date it is. April 13th. So people will hear this April 14th. I think it's likely that this is going to be extended another month in a lot of places. Is that what you think?
Oh, I certainly hope not. In my home state of Alabama, we're supposedly considering until May 1, but I certainly hope it doesn't get extended beyond that. I don't know. Yeah.
See, I don't know either. In Florida, it's supposed to be through the end of the month of April, but it's just hard to tell. And another thing, I've commented on this a couple times. I've gotten to the point where at first I was, people I think have known my trajectory on this now. I was very, very, very concerned about a worst case scenario coming out of this. And then as I observed the way it was being treated and talked about and reported on, just the obvious flaws in the reporting of the stuff that's being left out, or the comparisons they would make that would be tendentious between two different countries. Okay, but I could pick two other countries. I could pick, you're going to say, well, look at Italy versus some other country, and look at this one did better than that one. Okay, I could pick the Netherlands and Belgium and prove exactly the opposite point. So let's be honest that we can pick pairs of countries that we think are going to teach a cute little lesson about this thing. But for every pair of countries, I can find a pair of countries that seem to teach the opposite. So it's not absolutely obvious that the approach taken in all these places is what's responsible for what. I mean, why are there 0 deaths from the coronavirus in Vietnam? I mean, why is that? They have plenty of cases. Why 0 deaths? Is it really because of social distancing and masks? I mean, I know masks are a good idea, but is that really what you're going to tell me? There's so much more going on here that we haven't begun to understand, and we want to assume that politicians solve the problem. I'm just not on board for that. But anyway, you know what? I don't even know how to finish this. At this point, I start talking. I can't stop talking.
But the point you just made also is exactly why we shouldn't have politicians making, huge decisions that will have an impact for decades. I mean, that's precisely why we should be more circumspect in shutting down the world. In other words, the burden of proof ought to lie on those who want to shut down the world, not on those who want to be cautious and see how it goes.
Okay. Jeff, I was about to jump into some other points, but I'll never shut up. And I've said what I want to say. I have been writing a lot in my newsletter about this. I have some people in my private group who are in the medical field and who are working in hospitals, have been reporting on what they've been hearing and seeing. And I've been reporting on that in my newsletter, just because it's been therapeutic for me, going from somebody who was worried about the worst case scenario. And then, as I say, just watching the way they've reported it, or I'll look at the same chart and numbers they're looking at, and I'll say, oh, look, here are 3 clearly good news points. Why are they not mentioned at all? Or I'll go to Drudge, which is hopeless. And this is right after the head of the CDC had said that the number of deaths will be, quote, much, much, much lower than previously projected. He used the word much 3 times. I thought, okay, guarantee this will not be mentioned on Drudge. Sure enough, no mention of it whatsoever. To keep my sanity now, I don't care if people criticize me for this. I don't care. I go on Twitter and I follow former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson. Now, I don't agree with him on everything, but it saddens me that I even need to preface it with that. Who cares? On this, he's been really good because he's the guy who reads the medical papers. He's the guy who looks at the charts and says, wait a minute, are you guys not seeing that that this rate is falling and that number is plateauing and this and that? And then when you do report that, I've never in my life, Jeff, and I'm sorry I've talked more in this conversation than in any interview we've ever done. It's because I can't stop talking about this. But I have never seen a situation where good news makes people angry like it does here. On Twitter, you spread some good news, people want to rip your head off. It is the weirdest thing.
Well, it's psychological. We're all psychologically invested in a worldview, and we want to take the facts out there, the happenings, the events, and make them comport with our worldview. It's the most natural thing in the world, but it's not a very happy thing when your worldview is that, oh, this virus is the biggest thing ever, and that Trump is totally incompetent, and so there's just going to be lots and lots of deaths. And if that doesn't come true, you feel discomfort. I don't want to be that person.
Agreed. All right. We're going to, that is exactly what I think is happening. And I think partly it's not just that people don't want to admit that maybe they were wrong. I think it's more that, as you say, they're invested in it in a way that it's like they feel like I'm accomplishing something by staying home. And to some degree, maybe they are, but it's like their whole identity is wrapped up in this. Like, this is why, no normal person goes and reports that their friend is playing golf. No normal person does that. There's no risk. You're out in the middle of nowhere playing golf. You're nowhere near another human being. What would make somebody do that if not this feeling of, I'm accomplishing something? And so telling them this is not necessarily the greatest contribution to mankind that you could make may not be what they want to hear. All right.
Well, it's not quite storming the beach at Normandy. Let's just say that.
Not indeed. But when you have no Normandy in your generation, you grasp at what you can. So, all right, I'm going to link to your piece on the Governor's, tomwoods.com/1631. And of course, folks should go to the Mises Institute website, mises.org, mises.org. And as long as you're stuck, I know you guys actually have an ongoing series of readings for people while they're stuck at home. That's a great thing to do. Instead of nothing wrong with playing video games, but instead of just playing video games, you can emerge out of this thing knowing an awful lot by spending some time with the amazing resources at Mises.org. All right, thanks for your time, Jeff.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it. Now, as long as we are under house arrest, you should be working on a project. And for heaven's sake, if Woods hasn't convinced you now with what's going on that you should be building that little side business or something to have when the SHTF, then I don't know how I'm ever going to get through to you. So spend this time wisely and read my free ebook on how to do this and 5 different ways of doing it that I personally have done that I can actually walk you through the steps. First do this, then do that. You can go grab that for free over at pathstoincome.com, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.